to our class today. You are learning about the residential listing agreement. And my name is Nancy Oakley. I'm your education events manager here with Citrus Valley Association of Realtors. Welcome to our class today. We have a lot of great classes and events that are coming up through the association. So please check out our calendar. It's cvarconnect.com. Go to our calendar and check and see what we have coming up with regards to classes. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ed Estes. Ed Estes is one of our great speakers and always likes to come back and join us here at CVAR. Ed is a real estate attorney. He is a broker, and he is also the head of the real estate department out at Mount San Antonio College. So thank you so much for being here today, Ed. I appreciate everything you do, and I'm going to turn it over.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And as Nancy mentioned, I do this to publicize the real estate program at Mount SAC. Not that you are thinking about getting a license, you already have a license, but you may know somebody who's interested in getting a license. So just want to remind everybody that we do have a real estate program at Mount SAC. Of course, I'm now getting announcements for people coming in. Let me try to move this over a little bit so I can talk. Okay, so let's talk about the residential listing agreement. Now, normally I can get through this contract in about, 60 minutes. With questions, it might take me 90 minutes, but we now have the COVID form. So I'm going to be talking about with this agreement. And then we've also got the new clear cooperation rule or clear cooperation policy, depending on whether you want to call it the rule or the policy. So we're going to talk briefly about what's this clear cooperation, how does it affect you taking the listing, and then what you should be doing or not doing with paragraph 7 of the listing agreement. So for those of you who haven't taken a listing in a few months, yes, the listing agreement has been changed as of June, and we've got a new section dealing with clear cooperation. So we've got to get through that as well. So let us move along. And I understand Nancy is going to try to email this out as a handout for all of you. If for some reason you don't get it, ask her for it. She'll send it out to you. If you want a copy of it in PDF form, I can share it with you. Again, I just look at this as publicizing the Mount SAC real estate program. And I think hopefully all of you will agree that when you finish this class, if you knew somebody or know somebody who's thinking about getting a real estate license, they'll learn more in real estate principles from me than from some home study school, right? So that's the whole game. So that's the end of the commercial. Let us now move on if I can.
So Ed, real quick, if they want a copy of the handout, just email me and I'll put my email in the chat. Perfect. Just send me a quick email and say, hey, Nancy, send me the handout from today's RLA class, and I'll go ahead and get it on over to you. Perfect. Thank you.
Super. All right, so now let's move on. Our first document, just want to talk about this briefly. This is the AD form or agency disclosure form. Simple instruction here. This is always the very first document your seller will sign. So before they sign anything else, they have to sign this document. It discloses the difference between single and dual agency. That is all it does. It does not create agency. You create agency with an agreement like the listing agreement. But the law says you have to disclose the difference between single and dual before you create agency. So just remember, whether dealing with buyers or sellers, even though right now we're dealing with sellers, this is always the very first document your party is going to sign, right? If they don't sign this and they sign the listing agreement, what's the impact? The impact is you are not entitled to a commission. Failure to disclose the difference between single and dual agency means you give up your right to enforce your commission agreement. So very important, your parties need to sign this at the very beginning. Now, the next document, possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent. This contract or this document essentially does two things. It says you can represent two sellers of virtually identical homes and there's not a conflict of interest. That's number one. Number two, it says that if an offer comes in from another licensee in your brokerage office, which means you have to go into dual agency, your seller agrees to go into dual agency. They can't somehow get out of the deal by saying, when you present the offer to them, no, I don't want dual agency. I insist on single agency. Of course, what happens there? Well, it could really mess up your negotiations, right? Because the seller will not consent to dual agency. This document says if the seller has to go into dual agency because the offer was procured by somebody else in your company, the seller is agreeing to do that, right? So again, this has to be the second document your seller signs. I know a lot of you are getting this document signed in escrow because you have to, because your broker won't give you a commission unless your file is complete. And of course, the purchase agreement says that you've already given the parties this form, but it doesn't do you any good because you're already in contract, right? You're already in escrow. So since you have to do the form, you might as well do the form the way it was intended, the way it will give you some protection, and that is get this form signed right after the agency disclosure and before you go into the listing agreement. Our next forms. So here we got the COVID, right? So I know many of you have already taken my COVID class. We're not really doing the COVID class anymore because we live COVID right now. We're what, 6+ months into COVID. So we all know COVID. We all know what we're supposed to do. We don't know why we're doing it, but we're doing it, okay? So just to refresh, we're going to go over the 4 forms that you need to concern yourself with as the listing agent. Remember, if you're representing the buyer, some of these forms will overlap, but then you have other forms like that CVA, that addendum to the purchase agreement dealing with impossibility, force majeure. We're not going to talk about that because that deals with buyers. Nancy will bring me back and I'll do the buyer representation agreement. Then we'll talk about those forms. Right now, we just want to deal with the forms you have to concern yourself with when dealing with the seller. The PEAD-S, the RLA-CAA, best practices, the BPPP, and then the posted rules of entry, the PRB. So first form, okay? Coronavirus entry advisory and declaration. This form is going to be given to the seller, probably your third form, right? We're going to do these forms in order, so to speak. This is the third form you're going to give the seller. And what does it do? Well, first of all, it tells them that putting their property on the market and having people they don't know come in and walk through their property is a little dangerous when we're dealing with a worldwide pandemic. Second, the seller is acknowledging to follow the rules and they do not feel ill. And if they do feel ill, they're going to let you know because you don't want to bring buyers who are presumably healthy into a pandemic infested household, right? So this is given to the seller when you list the property. And I would do it right after the PRBS. So you do the AD form, that was the first form, the PRBS, that was the second form, and now this form as your third form, okay? So you can read it with them, they can read it. The key is make sure they sign it. You would use this with any seller or occupant. So if you do have a tenant occupied property that you have for sale, you would use this form as well. So who's ever living in the property, who's an adult, needs to sign this. Do you have to have minors sign it? No, don't have to have minors sign it because they don't have capacity under the law. But seller, any other occupant, 18 or older or emancipated, has to sign it. Now, the next form is the best practices. Your office, excuse me, is required to have a prevention plan for activities in the office. And that one is like, I think, 5 pages, probably seen it. We have a smaller version. It's this one, it's 2 pages that we're going to share with the seller. And what it does is it talks about showing rules for listing and buyer's agents, okay? What they're supposed to be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. On the next page, we're instructing the seller that after every showing, it is the seller's responsibility to clean and disinfect the property. The seller is expected to have masks available at the property and disinfectant available at the property and gloves available. Having said that, you as the agent should have in your trunk extra masks, extra gloves, and disinfectant. So you're kind of like a mini prep station, but they should also be in the house. As visitors come in, again, we do not want to show properties to more than 2 people at a time. In other words, more than 1 couple at a time. Sometimes that can't be helped. We do not want to have children in the property as it's being shown, because what do we know about children? They touch everything. And after they touch things, what do? They put their hands in their mouth. And after they do that, what do? They touch everything else, right? So again, please keep kids out of the property. Limit the showings to a couple. We don't want a horde of people coming through. What about open houses? Is there any way you can possibly do an open house? Really, no, you really can't. And most of the counties, most of the cities have prohibitions against open houses anyway. I guess if the county didn't prohibit it, could you do a sequential open house where you work in tandem with another agent and you disinfect the people outside, they come in, see the property, leave, discard their gloves and their mask, and then you bring another disinfected party in. Yeah, I guess you could do that if the county or the city didn't prohibit open houses, all right? But doing it the old way, the way we like to do it, can you do it? No, you really can't. And I don't think you want to do it that way because the neighbor across the street is going to report you. And if they don't report you, they're going to defame you on social media. So it's going to hurt your business. So be very careful about that. Talk to your GAD person. For most of you, that is going to be Nancy, break in here. Who's our GAD person? I've escaped his name.
Bill Rue.
Yeah, Bill Rue. Talk to Bill Rue. He can fill you in what you can and cannot do as far as the government's concerned. How could I forget Bill Rue? Okay, so now we go to our next form. This is an addendum to the listing agreement. So why did I throw this form in? Well, it is recommended that you attach this to the listing agreement, which now makes your listing agreement a COVID listing agreement. So let's go through the pertinent paragraphs so I can explain exactly what this one does. First of all, in dealing with property showings, the seller can agree and insist on, and I'm going to paragraph B 2 and 3, that any buyer prior to coming through the property has been pre-qualified or pre-approved. The thinking is every buyer now coming in is a legitimate, viable buyer. Now, all good agents should have their buyers pre-qualified and pre-approved before they show them properties anyway. But we know that there are a lot of agents out there that are not that good. So they don't. Let's be good agents. Have your buyers pre-qualified or pre-approved. What's the difference? Pre-approval is better. Besides that, we don't know. There's no definition of either of those terms, but get them as qualified or approved as possible, because now you know that you have a legitimate buyer and you're not wasting your time with them. So second, the buyer or the potential buyer has viewed the property online first. You see, if a buyer sees the property first online and then goes and sees it in person, well, they kind of already like it, right? So they're a more legitimate buyer. The whole idea is we're trying to filter out looky-loos, because when you're in a pandemic, you are putting people at risk, the seller, but also the buyer, right? There's no guarantee that that seller, although they're feeling great, they're running 10 miles a day, they're doing all these activities, they just happen to be asymptomatic. They've got full-on COVID, but they don't show any symptoms, and they could be infectious, right? So please, if you are representing a buyer, you see in the listing for showing instructions, please pre-qualify your buyer. Please verify they have seen the property online. If it says that there, that probably means that listing agent has a listing with B2 and 3 checked. Please cooperate with them. What if you don't? Will anybody know? Well, God will know, right? I mean, it's not something we can really enforce. This is just a matter of showing and engaging in professionalism. Our next item, paragraph 2, marketing activities. Here, the seller is agreeing for you to do the following marketing activities. Now, you may look at this and say, I don't do anything with landscape services. Right, but some agents will list a fixer-upper that's yard looks like crap, has a landscaper that they can refer to get the property cleaned up. You see where I'm coming from here, right? We often will help the seller with contractors, maintenance people to get their properties spruced up. You're providing that service and this house warrants it, then go ahead and check those boxes. Essentially, we're letting the seller know that there's going to be people coming into this property, on the property, in the property to take photographs, virtual tours, things like that. Okay, you're going to want to do your AVID inspection, right? You want to do that when you list the property. Okay, so seller is good with that. Second, post acceptance, which is a fancy way of saying what's happening in escrow, right? Well, a lot of sellers don't realize all that happens in escrow. They, okay, we got an acceptance. Are we ready to close? I'm involved with the foreclosure right now. And somebody thought, well, that fact that we're into the 3-month period, and now we're going into the 3-week sale period, title was just going to get transferred over. Oh, no. This is where it gets dicey, right? Where does your transaction get dicey? In escrow. So we're going to have all kinds of activity, appraisers, inspectors, investigations, all these things happening. We want to make sure the seller understands what's happening here. So now, if the seller doesn't agree to this, they check the box doesn't agree. In the earlier, if they don't agree to this, they check the box they don't agree. Of course, if you got a seller that's not agreeing to this, then, you know, at best, you probably have what? A pocket listing, you know, an office exclusive. You're not going to be able to effectively market the property. Why does CAR put the box in there doesn't agree? Well, we're trying to make sure that this contract is negotiable between the agent and the seller, all right? But again, checking those do not agree boxes, you're not going to have a viable listing. You're not going to be able to effectively market it or transfer it. Next page. Temporary withdrawal of the property from the market. So if you have a situation where the seller just says, oh, no, you know, I don't want those people coming to my house. I want you to represent me. I want to list this property, but I think we should withdraw it from the market. Okay, so by checking paragraph 7, allows the seller to have the property pulled off the market, and it states that the amount of time it's off the market, your listing date will be extended. In other words, if you take a 6-month listing, the seller pulls it off the market for 2 months and then wants to bring it back on the market, your 6-month listing has been extended for another 2 months beyond the 6-month termination date, all right? Unless you check the box in there, it says it won't, which means then you're just screwed, right? You just lost 2 months of marketing the property. So again, like in all contracts, there's room in here for negotiation, but I think it is fair. I think you have very comfortable ground to say to the seller, look, seller, if you pull the property off the market for 2 or 3 months, you should be able to give me that time back to continue to market the property, because I'm spending time and money to try to find a buyer, a purchaser for your property. Now, our next form is called the posted rules of entry. or the PRE. So the responsibility for this and the next form being posted on the door or some other conspicuous place that a prospective buyer would see it is actually on the buyer's agent. However, we know there are a lot of agents out there that don't always take over their responsibility. So my recommendation is for listing agents to have this in the next form that you're about to see, laminated. Doesn't cost that much to laminate. Some of your office may already have laminations. Just go to Kinko's or any office supply store, depending on who's open now, and have them laminated, tape them to the front door. This is a narrative that wash your hands and disinfect them before entering the property, wear a mask, social distance a minimum 6 feet, please don't touch anything, and then properly dispose your disposable gloves. Don't just throw them out in the Ralph's parking lot, because now what you've done is created a biohazard, right? Or in the seller's front yard. I mean, don't make things worse. And that's what people are doing when they dispose of their gloves. It's kind of like the people who walk their dog. The dog does their duty. They pick it up with a little doggy bag, they wrap it up, and then they leave it for someone else to pick up. How considerate, right? The next form is a companion form. This form is designed for people who have difficulty reading, right? So this form are people who are good at reading and like to read. For those people that don't like to read, we've got a pictograph. It's got the same pictographs here, but they're bigger, less text, easier to get through. And again, it reminds people that if you've been infected or in contact with somebody in the last 14 days, please don't come into the house. I mean, that's kind of our incubation period, 14 days to wait until you go out into the public, right? That brings us up to the RLA, but now I would like to go into the chat room and make sure I don't have any lingering questions, if I can make this work. And let's see, okay, so we just have Nancy's stuff there. That's all good. Let me now go into the listing. And what I like to do is basically at the end of each page, I like to open it up for questions, and I will go into the chat room.
There is a question that came in on mine.
Okay.
Person asking would like to know why so many sellers and their agents want to remove CVA from offer in their counter if we are still in a pandemic.
Okay, so I don't know why you would want to remove it. One of the problems with being a lawyer, I'm sure there are a lot of problems with being a lawyer. I'm sure you could give me a list of problems with lawyers. One of the problems with being a lawyer is sometimes I don't understand why non-lawyers do something, and invariably they do it because they were told to do it, but they were never explained why. The purpose of the CVA, that is an addendum to the contract that addresses what will happen if, due to COVID, one of the parties cannot perform. You either cancel or you extend escrow for 30 days. Those are your choices under the CVA. So the parties are agreeing, look, if the seller or the buyer cannot perform due to COVID, we will cancel. Why? Because the CVA says so. If the parties cannot perform because of COVID, we will extend 30 days so that the parties are able to perform. So we either terminate or you don't terminate. That's the choice given to you in the CVA. And if you need 30 days or you're going to cancel, you provide evidence that the party can't perform, okay? So that's why we have the CVA. Without the CVA, now you've got a contract, but the parties have not decided what to do. So with no CVA, what do you do if one of the parties can't perform? Well, somebody say, well, we'll just cancel. But the non-canceling party, or excuse me, yeah, the non-canceling party, in other words, the defaulting party comes in with the argument of impossibility or force majeure, which is a legal principle that says if a party cannot perform and it's not their fault and it was unforeseen, then we don't cancel the contract. Oh crap, now what do? Well, I guess you could argue this in court. Of course, you're not going to get into court probably for another year because the courts are now effectively shut down due to COVID. And when they do open, they're dealing with the criminal cases. And then they're going to do it with all those landlord-tenant cases because you can't evict a tenant now, basically. So what do? And that's the problem with not addressing the issue of COVID in a contract today. So why would agents recommend not using a CVA? I've got no idea, unless they are being either badly informed or they are misinformed. But I strongly recommend using that CVA. Right? Did anything else pop up, Nancy, before I get into the RLA page 1?
Yes, one last question. Same person. One option is to extend removal of contingencies period. Can you speak to this?
Well, again, and the CVA does talk about we will extend the period of time. Now, the default language in the CVA is 30 days. But as all of you know, any place there is a time deadline, whether it's 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 17 days, 21 days, 30 days, right? You always have a blank next to it with a little or, and you can change it. So what you do in the CVA, if they need more time, well, the default is 30 days. If you want to make it 15 days, if you want to make it 10 days, 14 days, 21 days, you can change that. But without that CVA, you're now setting the parties up to try to negotiate. And what if you can't come up with an agreement? The whole idea of an agreement is that you're not renegotiating in the middle of escrow, right? That's why we have agreements. If you don't like that, then I guess we could just have verbal purchase agreements, right? Because they're not enforceable. I mean, the whole idea is to make this an enforceable agreement. And the CVA addresses an issue that is very real, and that is COVID. All right. So again, strongly recommend you use the CVA. If you've got brokers out there that are recommending against it, I'm scratching my head and saying, I think they're giving their licensees poor advice. I certainly think licensees are giving the parties poor advice because you don't want to go into a contract unless you've ironed out as many of the details as you possibly can, because you're just asking yourselves for drama later down the road. Right? Anything else, Nancy?
That's it for now.
Okay. So I'm sure I'm
Thank
going to
you.
get a host of emails from brokers, but bring it on, right? Bring it on. Okay, so let's get into the purchase agreement. At the top, date prepared. We just do this to give this contract a name. This is the contract dated, hypothetically, November 1, 2020, right? So you just do that for a name. Remember, all of your timeframes go from date of acceptance or date of signature in CAR documents. We want to list all the sellers. Always a good idea to look up the vesting on the tax rolls. You can do that through the MLS, go into Realist, or is it Realist, I think it is, and you can pull up the tax rolls. That will give you a pretty good idea who the seller is or sellers, just to verify. Sometimes there are people on title that people forget about. I had one situation where an agent actually wrote an offer on a property, got a counter offer back, didn't recognize the name of the counter offer. It seems the tenant was trying to list and sell the property, thinking the landlord wouldn't find out about it. And the listing agent never bothered to verify, is this purported seller the actual owner of the house? And they weren't, they were the tenant of the property. So put all the names of your sellers there. Grants to your broker or brokerage company. Remember, your name doesn't go on here. It's your brokerage company. Typically the name of the firm, because that is typically a DBA, doing business app, or a corporation that your broker, the actual human that you address as your broker in the office, has created for their brokerage office. Now, as we go through the listing agreement, I am going to address the 3 objections. This isn't a how to get a listing class or a class on how to overcome objections to listings, but having been in the business for over years, long time, I do like to address some of the objections you might get, and there are 3, okay? The first objection is the time period. Okay? The second objection is going to be the price, and the third objection is going to be the commission. So those are your 3 objections: the term, the price, and the commission. So you need to have responses for those 3 objections. Going into a listing appointment and hoping they don't bring those up is not a plan. You need to have a plan. And let me give you my plan for the listing period. Most of us like to take listings for about what, 6 months, right? And it depends. If I was taking a listing, say next month in November or in December, I would probably take it for 7 or 8 months, because we know that the holidays is a tough time. And we know that January is kind of like a fog, right? Nothing really happens the first 2 weeks of January. People are trying to figure out what to do with their new year, right? So I would take it to the end of June. But normally in a normal situation, we like 6 months. So when you are confronted with a seller that says, no, I only want a 30-day listing or a 45-day listing, you know that to try to get this property effectively marketed and exposed into the market, that's just not enough time. So this is what I would recommend. Prior to going on this appointment, go into the market area. It could be the city, it could be the zip code, it could be whatever you think is the market area. The area that you're going to be pulling comparables on, right? Other listings, active listings, other pendings, other solds, right? Go into that market and look up either number of pendings or the number of solds in the last 30 days. Not both, because then you're going to be double counting, okay? So either pendings or either solds, okay? Typically, whichever one is the lower number. And then take that number and divide it by the number of currently active listings in that area. So because I'm mathematically challenged, let me make it really easy. Let's say there were 10 sold properties in the last 30 days. And there are currently 100 listings in that market. And I say 100 listings, that's a lot. Yeah, but the math works easy this way. So you take 100 and divide it by 10, and you get 10 months. You see, if 10 properties sold last month and you've got 100 listings, it's going to take 10 months to get rid of all that inventory, ignoring the fact that more inventory is being added every day because new listings are taken all the time. But Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if we go into this market now and you're saying only to give you a 45-day listing period, but we have 10 months of inventory, that's not a realistic time frame to get me to sell your property unless you agree to price your property below the lowest price property in the area. If you agree to be the lowest price property, I'll take your listing for 45 days. But if you want to have your property priced competitively out there, I need to insist on a list of 6-month listing if we have 10 months of inventory, right? What you're doing is you're giving the seller data to support your position, okay? So I think that's helpful. Now, as we now continue, you put in the county, it says California, the zip code. Do you have to put in the assessor parcel number? No, you don't. But of course, what did I tell you to do? Go and look at the tax rolls through the MLS, through RealList. It will have the tax roll or the tax assessor parcel number there. You want to go in there anyway to look who the seller is to make sure you're actually talking to the real seller. So go ahead and put that number in there. It's just a second way of describing the property, right? If you're listing vacant land, sometimes vacant land doesn't have an address. Sometimes vacant land is not on a street. You can use the assessor parcel number to identify the property. It's not a legal definition. Of course, nor is a street address, right? Block track, meets and bounds, U.S. government survey. Those are the descriptions we have to put on the deed, but a street address or a parcel number is sufficient. So for describing the property, we will write down the common address described as 123 Elm Street, situated in Glendora, County of Los Angeles, zip code, and then the assessor parcel number or APN. Now, if this property that you're listing is a manufactured home or is part of a probate conservatorship or guardianship, then you would want to add those addendums to that. CAR used to have separate listing agreements for manufactured or mobile homes, probate listings, conservatorship, guardianships. They don't anymore. They just add an addendum to it. Now we get into the price, which is our second objection. So we put in the price just like you would write a check, assuming some of you still write checks, right? So it would be the alphabetic amount followed by the numeric amount in the parentheses. You want to do both because it acts as a check on each other, right? If you just type in the numeric amount in the parentheses, zip forms will automatically write it or spell it out for you. But if you are filling this out in the field, of course, you can't do that. Listing terms. The second section was originally designed 30 years ago for FHA and VA, because we know with FHA and VA, the seller may have to pay an additional amount for repairs and with VA, closing costs, right? So this is where you would put seller to consider FHA or VA. You can also use this if you're going to be doing a value range marketing. So if you're taking a property in a range, I still recommend you put an amount there. That amount is what the seller is agreeing to entertain an offer for, or at least is willing to pay you a commission if an offer comes in at that amount. So that's kind of the threshold. So let's say we're listing this property at $800,000, but you want to market it in a range. You think it's worth probably about $800,000, but it's a really nice house. It might appeal to a more affluent buyer. And you want to appeal to buyers that might be scared off by the $800,000. So then you do a 10% range and you list it between $760 and $840, $876. When you do a value range, on the high end of the value range, you always want the last three digits to be 876. So this property will be marketed as, or in a range of, 760,000 to 840 or 848.76. Did I say that right? 840.876. Why the 876 and the last three digits on the right-hand side of the comma? Well, some online platforms will not accept a value range price. CRMLS will, but Google or Zillow or who knows what, they might not. You don't know where this listing is going, right? Those IDX feeds are coming from all kinds of places. if you don't put in the 876 and the platform that's picking this listing up through an IDX feed does not accept value range, they just take the high number and to alert people that this is actually a value range, you put the 876. So anybody in the real estate business who does value range marketing or familiar with value range marketing knows that if the last 3 digits is 876, that's the high end of a value range property. Why 876? Well, if you look on your phone keypad and you look up the letters 8 and 7 or the numbers 8 and 7, 6, the number 8 is the letter V, the number 7 is the letter R, and the number 6 is the letter M, VRM, value range marketing. So that's how it comes about, right? So it's just a way to clue in other people that this is a value range marketing. And then if you're doing that, you need to let the seller know, look, if any offer comes in that range, you agree to either accept or counter it. You will not ignore it. What this does is those low-end buyers that are thinking about making an offer at, say, 765, 762, they're more inclined to do so because they know that the seller will either accept or counter. They won't ignore their offer. And if a buyer knows that the seller's more inclined to counter, they agree not to ignore, well, then that buyer is more inclined to make an offer. And that's the idea. Purpose of value range marketing is to try to create more activity. You know, some agents like it, some agents don't. If you like what I just said, then try it out. If you don't, then don't do it. Okay. I'm not advocating it one way or another, but I know it can create more activity. All right, now we go into paragraph 3, compensation to the broker. First of all, statute of frauds in California says not only does your listing agreement must have a commission amount, but it also has to have, in 10-point bold type, a notice that commissions are not set by law or practice and are negotiable. Now, it does not mean you have to lower your commission. The seller says, hey, will you lower your commission? And you say no. Was that a negotiation? Yes. You might call it the Soviet style of negotiating, right? It was very short, but there was a negotiation, right? There was an offer and a rejection. Now, this is our third area of negotiations, okay? Our third area of objections. So what do you do here? Well, my recommendation is when you go to a listing appointment, you come in with your explanation of what you do, how great your broker is, what your broker does. You present your marketing plan, show the seller how you're going to advertise and market the property. And then at the end, you ask the seller, based on what you've seen so far, would you be comfortable in having me represent you? Do you think I am competent, if you want to use that word, to handle your real estate needs? And you need to get a yes or no from them. Now, they may come back and say, well, I don't know what you're going to list it for. Okay. You say, look, we will list it at market price, because if we overprice it, what happens? Well, if you overprice a property, will it still get shown? Potentially. But that $800,000 property that you've listed at $900,000, how does it compare with $900,000 properties? It doesn't. If you list it at $900,000, will $800,000 buyers see it? No. So what have you done? You've created a situation where the people that see it won't want to buy it, and the people that want to buy it won't see it, right? That's not where you want to be. So we will list it at market price. after we go through our comparative property analysis. Right? But what are you charging commission? We will get to that, okay? I will show you what my commission is. But what I really want to know is, are you comfortable with my marketing plan? You see, once you've sold them on your brokerage, your abilities, your marketing plan, they want to hire you, right? If somebody calls you up and says, what do you charge for commission? Do you answer them? Well, you have to answer them. And your answer will be, hey, I'd love to come over and talk to you about listing your property. When would be a good time? Well, I want to know what you charge in commission. I'd be happy to explain that to you. When would be a good time for me to come over and show you what I offer and what I charge? No, I just want to know what you charge. Don't go that way, right? Don't go that way, because they've already found somebody else who will charge less than you. They just want to cross you off the list. If you go to Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom, Bloomingdale's, I'm trying to think of other high-end stores. I don't even know if they're still open or not. But if you go to one of those stores to purchase a pair of blue jeans, what are you paying? Well, frankly, I don't know. But my students tell me somewhere between $200 and $300. If you go to Costco and buy a pair of blue jeans, what do you pay? $14.95, because that's where I get my jeans. All right. Now, do those two pairs of jeans have the same functionality? And the answer is yes, they do. But some people, and I'm not one of them, sees value in going to one of those high-end stores and paying $300 for a pair of jeans. I don't. I go to Costco and I pay $14.99 or $12.99, whatever they are, right? But there's value there. You see, you'll get the commission you want, whether it's 5%, 6%, 7%. We're not supposed to talk about commission, so Nancy, just ignore what you just heard. You'll get the commission you want if the seller sees value. But if the seller doesn't see value, it's going to be very tough to get your commission, right? And then be prepared to walk away. Because if you agree to take a commission at 1% less than you normally do, you basically have to do an additional sale every 5 or 6 transactions to make up for it, okay? In other words, if you do 12 transactions a year, but you give up a commission, you drop your commission like 1%, you need to make 14 sales to make up for what you lost. So again, hold on to your commission. So we put your commission amount in the percent area. Oh, one more thing, and not merely to backtrack, going to price. One of the things I found that was very effective, before I show them numbers, I ask them, or no, I don't ask them, I explain that an active listing is a property that is priced at a point where it will not sell today. If you think about that, I think you'll agree with me. An active listing is priced at a point where it will not sell today, because if it will sell, it would be a pending, right? A sold is a property whose value has been determined in the past. That's a sold price. That's what the property used to be worth. It may still be worth that. It may have gone up, may have gone down. We don't know, but that's what it was worth. A pending price. So a pending price is actually the old listing price, right? It's just that it's an escrow. We don't know what it really went into escrow with. We don't know what the actual sales price is. We just know that that pending price was the former active price, right? The listing price. But what we do know is properties priced at that amount get offers because it's in escrow. You can't get into escrow without getting an offer. So I'm trying to push my seller to the pending prices, because pending prices are amounts that get offers. That's why they're in escrow. Active prices are prices that presumably don't get offers. That's why they're still out in the market, right? So you might want to try that. Give that some thought. All right, so now let's move on. Under 3A, you either put a percentage, what I think most of you do, or you could put a flat amount, which I don't recommend. And then you've got an and area. This is if you want the seller to pay for additional amount for maybe additional services, transaction coordinator, marketing, extra advertising, things of that nature, okay? Or maybe you're going to charge them for COVID supplies. You're going to supply the masks, you're going to supply the gloves, you're going to supply the disinfectant, but you charge them for that. So you charge them I don't know, a $50 or $75 COVID mitigation fee for these services that you provide, because under the governor's order, you do have to provide those, right? Okay, oops, I'm trying to admit people in. So that is 3A. 3A2 is what we call our safety clause. So what 3A2 does, if you have a buyer that you're working with, but they're not ready to make an offer yet, and your listing expires, by putting in under 3A2 a number of days, and let's just use 45 days, right? If you write 45 in there, that buyer that you're working with, if you notify that buyer, notify that seller, you're a seller, of the name of that buyer prior to the expiration or at the time of expiration of this listing, and that buyer comes back after the listing has expired within 45 days of the expiration and makes an offer to purchase the property, you're still entitled to your full commission up in 3A, okay? But you do have to notify the seller in writing of the identity of the buyer. So it works really well if you are working with the buyer or somebody else in your office is working with the buyer. It doesn't work so well if the buyer is represented by a different brokerage agency, but that's how the paragraph works, all right? Paragraph 3 says that the seller sells the property, conveys it, leases it, rents it, or just makes it unmarketable, you're entitled to your commission, okay? The seller has essentially breached this agreement. And then we go back down to 3B. If the buyer breaches, the seller sues the buyer and collects money, you're entitled to half whatever the seller collects from the buyer, not to exceed your commission. And then C allows for an additional payment to broker. Now, whenever I talk about this, I get questions sometimes about transaction coordinators. Can I charge the seller for a transaction coordinator? And the answer is yes, you can. However, the DRE, although they don't have anything in writing, they have verbally told me, because I talk to assistant commissioners at the DRE all the time as part of my education stuff, right? I love to talk to the DRE because I don't list or sell property, so I don't have to worry about them coming after me because I've done something bad. But anyway, as my conversations with one of the DRE representatives, I asked them about this question, and they said, you know, we want to see something extra given if an agent is charging a seller or a buyer a transaction coordinator fee. So that could be having all of the documents printed and bound in a nice book. You can go down to Kinko, Staples, Office Depot, whatever, and they will do binding for you. So make a nice book, right? Or put it all electronically on a flash drive, okay? And maybe some other stuff. I don't know. But you need to do something special. That TC needs to do something extra to warrant charging them for it, because essentially you as the agent are supposed to do it anyway, right? That's where the commission comes in. So if my attitude is, if you can get a full commission, don't nickel and dime the seller by charging a TC fee. If you're reducing your commission and you want to charge them a TC fee, you can. But then again, DRE wants to see something special. Again, nothing is written about this. This is just a verbal that I've got from an assistant commissioner at DRE. And the thing, if the DRE tells you they want you to do something, then yeah, you should do it, because you don't want to poke the DRE in the eye, right? That's never a good idea. All right, so now we get into D. D1 explains how you're going to share that commission up in 3A with the cooperating agent. So you need to share your commission. Or if you're not going to share the commission, then you need to tell the seller, I'm not sharing the commission. Means if I don't find the buyer, nobody's going to find the buyer, right? And again, how you share that commission is up to you. If you put up here in 3A a commission of X, my recommendation would be to put in under D1 half of X. 6 up here, 3 down there. 5 up here, 2.5 down there. Do you have to do it that way? No. But I will tell you, and this is not a legal point, this is a business practice. The other agent is working hard too. If they find out, and they probably will find out when commission instructions are drawn, or certainly when the settlement statement is prepared, that you made more than they did, they're not going to be real happy with you. And sooner or later, you're going to write an offer on one of their listings. And it may be in a multiple offer situation. And you are hoping that they are going to deal fairly with you, and maybe they will, and maybe they won't. So again, for your business practice, you may want to discuss this at your next office meeting with your broker, okay? But Ed's feeling is share it equally, because I think it's a good business practice. But legally, you can do whatever you want to. However, if you're offering a much lower commission to the cooperating agent under D, let's say the average commission amount for a cooperating agent is 2.5. I don't know what it is, but let's say it's 2.5. But you're only offering 1, or the average commission is 3 that they're offering to the cooperating agent through the MLS, and you're only offering 1, is that property going to get shown? It might, but probably not as much as if you were offering more. Are you doing your seller a disservice? Yeah. Are you breaching your fiduciary duty? Maybe, okay? Because you're not effectively marketing the property. So again, that is why CAR put in paragraph D, you're disclosing to the seller how much you're sharing with the other agent. Okay, E says that the seller has irrevocably assigned the broker the commission. They cannot renege on it in escrow. And F deals with that protection period, that period of time after the expiration of the listing, where your buyer comes back and buys the property and you're still entitled to a commission. You see, if this listing expires and another agent relists it, but you've registered that buyer with the seller, then that second agent needs to exclude that buyer from their listing agreement for the same period of time. Otherwise, that seller could end up owing 2 commissions. So paragraph F2 allows you to exclude earlier buyers that were shown the property by the earlier agent that registered the name of the buyer with the seller. Paragraph F1 allows you to exclude another broker. Let's say you're listing a property that is currently listed under an open listing, Remember, you can typically cancel open listings at any time. They're unilateral agreements, but you still want to get that open listing broker out of the way. You can exclude that open listing broker for a period of days to give that seller a chance to cancel that open listing, because should that open listing broker bring in a buyer, the seller would not only owe a commission to them, but they'd also owe a commission to you because you didn't exclude them under paragraph F. In real world, are you ever going to be putting information in paragraph F? No, no. I mean, maybe if you're listing a property and the seller wanted to give their uncle a chance to buy the property under F2, you might exclude that uncle for a week, 10 days. They're not going to buy it. But again, you can exclude them because you want to take the listing right now, right? So you might put them in there under F2. All right, so I'm going to go up here and see who we have in the chat because I finished the page. Let's say good explanation on the corner of addendum. Do you add the pending and sold together? No, you keep them separate because the pending and the sold will overlap. You're basically doubling the number. So it's either solds or pendings, one or the other, divided by the number of active listings will give you your number of months of inventory. Okay, it's one or the other. Pick the lowest one. You can defend either one. Okay, either one is defensible. Just pick the lower one because the lower one will give you more months, which makes it easier to justify your listing period of 6 months or whatever you want to take. Okay, so someone was told by DRE Legal that section D1 is not a requirement. I was shocked by that. Do I compliance and notice some agents were not completing it? So I asked about ensure compliance. Has this changed? So let me go back up and look at D1. Okay. Not required. Okay, so if you are taking an office exclusive, and we'll talk about this in paragraph 7. If you are listing a property and not putting it on the MLS, then there is no reason to complete paragraph D1. However, you are now saying to the seller that you are not going to cooperate with another agent, which is actually a violation of the NAR Code of Ethics. Remember, when you ask DRE a question, DRE is going to give you an answer as it relates to real estate licensees. DRE will not give you an answer as it relates to realtors, right? Requirements for a realtor are different than the requirements of a real estate licensee. So you've got to be careful there because paragraph D2 talks about cooperation. Well, and compensation of brokers outside the MLS. Okay, so you run into kind of a gray area there. The other question is, have you fully explained to the seller the ramifications of not sharing a commission with another agent? What are the chances of the property getting sold by you not cooperating with other agents as opposed to you putting it in the MLS and offering a competitive commission, right? I mean, we all know the answer there. So if you're looking out after the seller's best interest, and if the seller is fully informed, I would say most sellers are going to say, yes, please cooperate with other agents. Please market this through the MLS. Please offer a commission to other agents that's competitive or comparative with what else is in the MLS so that I am on equal negotiating ground or equal marketing position with all the other properties out there, right? Okay, so that's where I am. So, oh, one other thing, and I've just created my new legal update for fall of 2020. we've got a new case that came out. I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but the case basically says, if you're talking to DRE legal, not CAR legal, but DRE legal, if you're talking to DRE legal and they give you an answer, they're not your attorneys. They represent the state of California. So you can't rely on what they say. And there's no attorney-client privilege with them. Now, things are a little bit different with CAR, but that's the rule on DRE. Okay, so be careful with DRE. Okay, so we got one more. Let's see, what do we got? No, I think
I have a few that came to me.
Okay.
How do you answer objections on commission?
You answer objections on commission essentially with the Mike Ferry approach. No. If they try to reduce your commission, you say no. I don't like quoting Mike Ferry because he only had a real estate license for 4 years and it was a good market. So what does he know about fighting through a bad market, right? But seriously, the way to justify your commission is to show value. That's the only way you can do it. You need to beef up your marketing plan, okay? You need to show that seller all the stuff that you're able to do. Because if the seller compares your services with a limited service broker and you're essentially doing the same thing, then I would have to say, why shouldn't I list with a limited service broker? I can't tell the difference between Neiman Marcus jeans and Costco jeans. So why would I buy Neiman Marcus jeans? There's no reason. I buy Costco jeans, right? You need to set yourself apart, and that comes to value, all right? So it's not you negotiate by showing greater service. You negotiate and justify your commission by giving value, because we all know what makes a Lexus better than a Toyota. Value. Okay, it's not that little L or that little squiggly thing that nobody knows what it is on a Toyota. But if you ever drive a Corolla, if you ever drive a, I don't know, Lexus 3, whatever they are, right? They're both made by Toyota, but one drives a lot more comfortable than the other. And what does that word in one? It's value, right? It's value. So that's how you have to negotiate. You have to show value. So again, talk about you first, how good you are, your successes, you know, your testimonials, that sort of stuff. Talk about your brokerage company, all the things your brokerage company can do, your relocation department, your marketing, your advertising, your whatever they do for you, okay? And then go into your marketing plan. This is how I'm going to get your property sold. These are the websites we use. This is the MLS. This is how I refresh the, you know, this is where I put more information. I spend extra money by raising the visibility in realtor.com. I do this on Zillow. I do all these things. Show them all these things, put it in a book or something tangible that you can give them, walk them through that, and then say, so what do you think? Do you like how I plan to market your property? You're not asking them to list with you, saying, do you like it? And you're going to tell right there, wow, yeah, you're really doing your stuff. And then when they ask, can you cut your commission? You say, you know, based on the marketing that I do, I really can't afford to. My job is to get you the best price, to negotiate in your interest, to really push your property out there on the market to get you an offer within the first 2 to 3 weeks. That's my objective. I just cannot afford to cut my commission with the services that I have provided. And then you might say, have you been talking to other brokers, other agents? And they'll say, yeah, we have. Well, may I ask you, how did my stuff compare? And they'll invariably say, well, you're much better. Bingo, you got them. You know, you've got them on the hook. Now just reel them in. See, they don't want to list with the other agent because the other agent's not going to do the stuff you're doing for them. They're going to try to cut the commission, right? Why not? Just say no. They'll come to you, okay? If you've given value, they'll come to you. Nancy, anything else out there before I go to the next page?
Yes. one question came in. If seller has a trust noted in the tax roll, then trustee is included after the seller name, but does not hold title in a family trust, make the listing a trust sale? Or is it only when there is a death of an owner / trustee? I have seen an MLS listing with trust sale, but no, there was no death of sellers.
Okay. What this is really a question on is more of disclosures than contract. This listing agreement will go basically the same way with either one. Your disclosures are different if somebody died. If nobody has died, we call that a living trust. If somebody has died, we call it a testamentary trust. That's where the kids are the successor trustees. Either way, the listing is taken in the name of the trust. So as we go back, okay, the seller is the trust. The John Jones Family Trust dated 1998 or whatever it is, okay? That's the seller. The trust is the seller. When we get to the signature page, you will then put for the name of the seller, the John Jones Family Trust dated 1998 by so-and-so trustee and then sign. So the contract will stay the same. The disclosures are different. For the living trust, no one's died yet, all the disclosures remain the same. For a testamentary trust, the disclosures are different. So what you need to do is get that trust disclosure form out. I think it's the TA Trust Advisory. I think that's what it's called, okay? And read it on what are included, because we've basically got, what, 3 people? We've got conservators and trusts, they're in one category. We got probate in the other category. And then we got lender-owned listings. Those are REOs. So we got the REO advisory, we got the probate advisory, we got the trust advisory, and they're all 3 different. And I can never keep all 3 of those. Some of them overlap and some of them don't. It'd be nice if the legislature would make it all the same, but they don't. So there are exceptions. For example, and this is the most common, if you have a probate, if you have a REO, real estate owned by a lender, or if you have a testamentary trust, in other words, they died, then there's no transfer disclosure statement. But if they're alive, it's a living trust, you still have to do a transfer disclosure statement, right? Okay, so again, it's a disclosure issue if they're dead or not. If they're living, it's still the same way, okay? It's the name of the trust by so-and-so trustee, and then the trustee's signature. Nancy, anything else? Silence constitutes acceptance in my law school. So let's go to paragraph page 2. And I'll go back to earlier questions, okay? It's just we've got about 45 minutes and I need to pick up the space, which is not a problem because the first page is where all the questions are. All right, so real versus personal property. Now, paragraph 4 is addressed in paragraph 8 in the purchase agreement. And paragraph 8 in the purchase agreement is the important one because that's between the buyer and the seller. So why does CAR put it in the listing agreement? Well, you should have a conversation with the seller about what's included and excluded. Are the flat screens included or excluded? Is that bracket, the flat screen is mounted on the wall, included or excluded? Because in the purchase agreement, the flat screen is not included, but the bracket is, unless you check the box and say the bracket's not. So you need to have a conversation with the seller about the spa, the gazebo, the barbecue. Are they going to be removing any plants? Plants? Yeah, sellers remove their roses, right? So, you know, you walk around the swing set, the Sears storage shed, you know, confirm with them that these things are staying And if they're staying, then you put it included. If the seller says, no, I'm removing this spa, okay, excluded. Lighting fixtures, the dining room chandelier, the entry chandelier, things of this nature. If anything's attached or looks like it's attached or might be attached, those barbecue patio units that they sell at the fair when we used to have fairs, those aren't attached, but they certainly look like they're attached because they're covered in stucco, right? Well, again, is it included? Is it excluded? That way you know what to put in or what to take out on the offer when it comes in, all right? But remember, whatever you put in paragraph 4, you need to put in or make sure it's included in paragraph 8 of the purchase agreement. So you may reiterate this in confidential remarks in the MLS. And if the agent representing the buyer doesn't include it in paragraph 8, then you need to address it in a counteroffer back to that agent because that agent didn't do their job. Paragraph B, okay? So lease systems, lien systems, the bottom line is the seller has acquired something like a solar system or an alarm system or a propane tank or a water softener or whatever that they don't actually own. Or if they do own it, it's got a lien, a loan. What does this mean? Well, when the property is transferred, then that lease or that lien needs to be assumed by the buyer. And sometimes they can't be, as in cannot be. So what has to happen? Well, the seller needs to pay them off, which is great if the seller has a lot of equity. But what have we found? Sellers don't always have a lot of equity, and that can be a real problem. So what we're trying to do now is take away any surprises. You have a conversation with your seller. Okay, seller, do you have a solar system, alarm system? Is there anything here that you're making payments on, or the payments are being made because of energy savings, or however they manipulated that contract? But if you go up to a house and you see an alarm system, or you see solar panels on the roof, you need to make an assumption that those probably aren't free and clear. There's either a lien on them or they're leased. So you need to have that conversation with the seller, right? And then the MLS. So what does the MLS do? Well, it does two things. It is one of the greatest marketing tools ever invented. I mean, what I love about the MLS, I'm a brand new agent. I joined CRMLS. I now have what? 40, 80,000 listings available to me, right? Instant inventory for the price of a quarterly MLS fee, which Nancy can tell you what it is, and it's amazingly affordable, right? It's right around $100, right? Can't beat that. But it is also an effective marketing tool, because when you put that listing into the MLS, you have given that listing access to what? Thousands, 80,000. I don't know how many members there are to the MLS, but just thousands of agents that have access to it. And that is incredible marketing. Unfortunately, there are agents that will list properties and try to keep it off the MLS for the sole purpose of trying to A, find the buyer themselves, or B, increase their marketing, personal marketing, by having a sign out in front of the property, but it's not available to other agents yet. But it creates all kinds of activity, right? So we want to make sure the seller knows what's going on. So if you're a good agent, you list the property, you put it in the MLS, you follow the rules, hey, no problem. But I'm sure some of you have seen agents out there that will take what we call the office exclusive or the pocket listing. They will list it. They will not put it on the MLS. Now, maybe they're not putting it on the MLS because the seller's daughter is getting married in the backyard next weekend. They don't want a bunch of agents coming over. That's a legitimate reason, right? But if the agent is trying to keep it off the MLS because they're trying to double in the deal, That's not a good reason. Needs to be explained to the seller. Now, some agents will take a listing and they'll put it in the MLS, but not the primary MLS. So the primary MLS for Glendora is CRMLS. They put it in a Bay Area MLS 500 miles away. They put it in the MLS, but it's not the local MLS. So anybody around here going to see it? No. So that needs to be disclosed. And that's why you have that box that you would check if you're putting the property in a non-local or non-primary MLS. Okay. Now, there have been agents out there that will try to tell the seller, well, they will tell the seller, we don't want to put our listing or your listing in the MLS because, you know, that's just full of nondescript riffraff agents. We want to market your property because it is a lovely property to a very exclusive group of agents who deal with exclusive properties like yours. So we have a private listing club that we would like to put your property into and not just put it in the MLS because that's just available to everybody. They have no standards, right? Well, that private listing group or club contains all of one or two people. That particular brokerage company, right? Anyway, that's what's been happening. So what this is a disclosure to the seller, alerting them that if you do not put your property into the local MLS, you are limiting its exposure and probably increasing the market time and may very well net a lower amount of money. And we're asking the seller to initial here so that they will actually read this paragraph in a process to become educated of what the MLS does. Now, we're going to get into a new paragraph as of June, and this is the public marketing of property, and it deals with clear cooperation. So, this listing agreement was created by CAR. It is a statewide listing agreement. You are members of CRMLS. CRMLS has a clear cooperation policy. Some MLSs in the state of California do not. Those that do not can check the box in 7A. You cannot. CRMLS has a clear cooperation policy. So you have to leave 7A alone. If you check that box, you're getting yourself into trouble because you are now making a misrepresentation. And since you're supposed to know what the MLS rules are for your MLS, one would argue it's an intentional misrepresentation or gross negligence, which could fall in the category of fraud. So please do not check 7A. 7B explains public marketing with clear cooperation. Okay. In other words, public marketing is marketing the property with flyers, yard signs, websites, digital communications, things of that nature. Okay. As opposed to an office exclusive or pocket listing, which is where an agent takes a listing, but they don't share it on the MLS. Now, you take a listing, you don't put it on the MLS. We call that a office exclusive or a pocket listing. What are you doing? Why are you doing that? Are you doing that because the seller's daughter is getting married in the backyard and they don't want to be bothered for the next 10 days? Or are you doing that to try to double in the deal, right? Represent buyer and seller. One's good, one's not so good. And then we've got the coming soon. What the heck is that? Well, it's kind of like pre-qualification and pre-approval. Nobody had a definition of what coming soon means. So a new category has been created in CRMLS for the coming soon. So basically, when you take a listing, this agreement in paragraph 7C says you can market this property as coming soon for up to 21 days, okay? And then put it onto the MLS if you want to do the coming soon. Or the seller can check the box in that second to last line that says, no, I don't authorize the broker to do coming soon. You list this property. I want this listing in the MLS tomorrow. Okay, so it's two ways to go. You either have the flexibility of doing coming soon if you wish to, or the seller checks the box and says, no coming soon. You put this in the MLS, actually, you have 48 hours, okay, 2 days to do it, okay? You either list in the MLS or you can do the coming soon. Now, CRMLS has given us this really cool little differences in statuses. And it talks about the 3 categories. And I like this so much, I took it off their website and put it in here. I also shared this with Ed Zorn, who is the legal counsel for CRMLS, and he didn't object to it. So I now have a license to use this in my little presentation to you. The 3 categories. The old pocket listing, that sounded kind of hokey, right? Or the office exclusive, that sounded like a premier level of service. No, it's now known as a registered listing. So within CRMLS, a registered listing is a listing that you have taken. You are not putting it in the MLS, but you have registered it with the MLS either through the MLS site or you have done so with that SELM form, all right? That's a registered listing. You are not cooperating with other agents. The coming soon, you're allowed to market. You're allowed to share a commission. You're not going to get days on market yet. It may be visible in the MLS, but no showings because it's not an active listing. It's coming soon. And it's for 21 days, no longer. Well, what if I want to do 25 days? That's coming later. It's not coming soon, right? CRMLS has decided coming soon is a maximum of 21 days. But what about longer? No, then it's not coming soon. You've got to go to registered and you cannot market it. Or we have active. And that's the old way. You know, you take that listing, put it in the MLS within 2 days, it's available to everybody. Days on market counts. The reason they created these two is to give some clarification of what they are. Also, days on market begin with the active. They don't begin with the registered or the coming soon until it goes into the MLS. So essentially, when it becomes available to other agents and other brokerages in the MLS, your days on market is going to begin. You can hold off on your days of market by using the coming soon or the registered. Just make sure the seller understands what's happening, right? And do not mislead the seller. Hold on for technical difficulties. Okay. And then the top page of the RLA, page 4, again, under D1, if the broker is to market the property to the seller, then it will begin on the date of the agreement. If, however, you are not to market the property out to other agents, other buyers, then it is a D2, and that will then mean you are holding this property back, okay? And you must use the SELM form. So basically, you're going either with D1, which means it's going to be a coming soon or a active. The coming soon, you will put that date in that blank under D1, not to exceed 21 days of when you're entering into this contract. If it's an active, then you just leave that blank in D1. You're going to go from the date of this listing. If you're going with a registered listing, in other words, an office exclusive or a pocket listing, then you click D2. Now, can you click F? No, because F says clear cooperation policy does not apply, but it does apply. So leave F alone. Okay, F is for other areas, other MLSs that don't have a clear cooperation policy. Now, Nancy, I bet I have a ton of questions. What do we got out there? Well, let me try
Wow.
I think we got 9 of them, or they're just saying thanks. Hopefully.
I can see a few. I apologize. I had technical difficulty. So
okay, hold on. I've got them here so I can go through. Let's see.
yeah.
What if they say, why can't I just list it on my own, sell my own? Well, if they want to be a for sale by owner, they certainly can. They don't have the power of the MLS. They can put it on as an individual in Zillow, because Zillow will take listings from sellers. The problem is they don't have the ability to pre-qualify buyers. Okay. They are going to have to come up with their own contract to create an enforceable agreement. When you look at my documents here, you see they all have sample. When you go to print a document, you can print it or you can print sample. If you're going to be sharing contracts with sellers as a visual aid or as an education tool, you are instructed to print out the sample copy so they really cannot use it to create their own deals. As you go through your marketing, you should be able to persuade them that you add enough value that they do not want to go as a for sale by owner. Question here from Amika, is that the same for a listing with an investor? You would use this agreement with any seller of a single family dwelling, one structure. If you are listing, or actually, no, I'm thinking of the purchase agreement. Yeah, it doesn't matter who the seller is, you can use this listing agreement. Let's see. So your email went out. Okay. CVA question. If an offer includes a CVA in paragraph 5A of the CRPA, seller accepts, initials every page of the contract, but not the actual CVA page, is the contract considered fully endorsable? You need to tie the CVA to the purchase agreement. So you need to reference the CVA as an addendum to the purchase agreement. And I believe you do that in, what is it, paragraph 5 or 6. I don't have the purchase agreement in front of me. And I know the stuff pretty well, but I'm not Gov Hutchinson. He knows it better than I am. But you need to address it there. And then on the CVA, you need to identify what the CVA is attached to, either the purchase agreement or the counter offer, for it to be a part of the agreement. Otherwise, you don't know if it's been included as part of the agreement or not. Let's see, will coming soon days be added to list expire date? If you're taking the listing period in the contract is the expiration. The days on market is what's going to be reflected in the MLS. Okay, so the expiration remains the same either way. It's just, does the MLS show the days from when you took the listing, or does the MLS show the days the listing became available in the MLS? So coming soon can have a time period beginning up to 21 days later than the original listing date. Let's see. Can you accept an offer in coming soon, even if you haven't shown it yet? Maybe an investor is purchasing. If a buyer comes to you and says, I want to buy this property, and that's only as a result of seeing the sign, then yes, you can. Just remember, if you're trying to use coming soon to market the property, collect buyers, show properties to buyers during a period where other agents aren't able to show the property, you're going to get yourself into trouble. Okay. So again, I almost have to take these case by case. Another CVA question. It sounds like we do have to do another purchase agreement class, Nancy. If an offer comes in, okay, I think I already repeated that one. Okay. I think I'm good. Nancy, do you have anything else?
Nope, that's all. I think you got all of them.
Okay, well, I'll still have time at the end, and I still have about 25 minutes. So
okay,
we got through D. Now, paragraph 8, MLS data on the internet. So again, if you're keeping something off the MLS, then it's not on the internet. But let's say you're me, and I want to put my property out on the MLS. I'm selling my house, but I don't want a bunch of people coming onto my property. For whatever reason, I don't want buyers walking on my property looking around, which sometimes happens when they see listings in Zillow and Trulia and Google and Realtor.com, right? Well, I can put my property into the MLS, and then I can use the SELI form, or you can click that little button in CRMLS, because CRMLS has it, where the property will not be visible in the World Wide Web. So it's only visible to members of CRMLS. That's the use of the SELI form. So you can make the property available to everybody, MLS and online. You can make the property available to just MLS members, so it doesn't go out into the internet, so non-licensees can't see it. Or you can do the SELM, which means you're treating it as a registered listing, office exclusive, or pocket listing, right? So you've got options. This explains those options, okay? Paragraph 9, seller's not aware of any legal actions against the property, any pending lawsuits or assessments that might limit or restrict the seller from conveying clean title. Paragraph 10 is what makes this a bilateral agreement. You, the agent, are promising to use due diligence to achieve the purposes. You're not agreeing to find a buyer. You're just agreeing to use due diligence to market the property, right? And the seller is agreeing to consider all offers and cooperate with you as you're showing the property and trying to find a buyer for the property. Now, if you want to in advance have the seller do some investigations of reports like termite, property inspection, homeowner documents, you can do that. I think homeowner association documents are kind of nice to get in advance, particularly if you think this property is going to sell pretty quickly. I don't like the seller to get a termite report or a property inspection, because a termite inspector could come out, not find infestation, and maybe the property does have infestation. Or a property inspector could come out, do an inspection, and miss something. But when the seller gives either or both of these reports to a buyer, the buyer may be less likely to do their own inspection. But then after they move in, they find problems, and now they sell the seller for giving them a bad report. That could happen. Or with termite, buyer gets their own inspector in escrow. Seller has agreed, which they shouldn't be agreeing, but they put it in the contract and you didn't catch it. Seller agreed to do Section 1 work, in other words, fumigate, but because the seller has a report that doesn't show the need for fumigation, they went ahead and agreed to that. And now the buyer's inspector comes in and finds infestation. And now the seller is saddled with a $7,000 fumigation bill. Oh, I've actually seen 2 termite inspections. One called for $38,000 of damage. The other called for $42,000 of damage repairs, okay? So it can be significantly more than what you're used to seeing. So seller is under no obligation to investigate their own property. So for the reasons I've given, I don't recommend the seller investigate their property. Paragraph 11 allows us to accept a deposit, although that's not a good idea. The contract, the purchase agreement says that the buyer will deliver the deposit to escrow within 3 business days, so we don't have to receive trust funds. Paragraph 12 simply explains that agency relationships, the disclosure has been done. And then we get to page 4. So let me go up here, and it looks like we have 2 questions in the chat. Let's see. Okay. The seller, okay, the question here, seller tying the CVA to the purchase agreement. You need to have the CVA signed and initialed. If it's not, then it's questionable whether it is a part of the purchase agreement. All right. So again, to include the CVA with the RPA, you need to reference it in paragraph 5 of the RPA. This person said 5A, and I believe it is 5A. And then on the CVA, at the very top, it will say this addendum is to, and you write in the purchase, or you check the box for the purchase agreement, and you put the date of the purchase agreement, and then you have to make sure that the parties sign it. If they don't, then the offer says that there's a CVA, but you don't know what CVA is. So yes, you do need to tie those 2 together. And if you don't tie those 2 together, then arguably it's not a part of the contract. All right. All right. So now going into our next page. Again, confirmation of agency, who represents seller, who represents buyer, will be done in the purchase agreement. And then E says, yes, you've already had the seller give that PRBS form, the one I talked about earlier. So again, you need to give them that PRBS form first. Paragraph 13 alerts the seller that, hey, people are going to be walking through your house. They may be making videos. They may be talking about it. Make sure you carry insurance. Lock up your valuables. Also, people are going to take pictures. You're going to take pictures, or you're going to have a photographer come in to take pictures. And it's going to go out on the internet, potentially. If you have anything valuable, please lock them up. If you don't want to be marketed in the World Wide Web, please get out of the way of my camera, right? So just alerting to the seller that anything you take pictures of, it's going to go out in the World Wide Web. Paragraph 15, seller agrees to put a key safe or lockbox on the property. Of course, if you check the box there, seller says no. Again, a lot of sellers out there, they say, well, I'm always home. They're not always home. Or they're in the shower. Or they're at the grocery store. Or they're in the backyard. If there's no lockbox on that property, and that agent calls the seller to show, and that seller doesn't answer the phone, a lot of sellers say, well, they'll just call back. No, they will not. They will show their buyer a different property. You need to impress upon the seller, particularly you new agents, you need to impress upon the seller that that agent with a buyer, they don't care if they sell their buyer the seller's house or somebody else's house. They care about selling that buyer a house. And they don't care which house it is. So if this house is not available for that agent to show, they're going to show that buyer other houses. They're going to write offers on other houses, and your seller is not going to have a chance of selling their house. So it's important to have a lockbox. And then at this point, I would take your lockbox out. I would show them how it works and show them when you access the box, how you get a text or an email showing who went in to the lockbox. Show them how it works. There's a lot of safety features, a lot of security features in that lockbox. So demonstrate that lockbox to them. The other nice thing about this is it will then show you that when you go out and read that lockbox entry, you went into that lockbox 5 times within 3 or 4 minutes on the same day. That's when you were demonstrating the lockbox. Clearly, that's when you put the lockbox on the property. Paragraph 16 allows us to put a sign on the property. If you check the box, then no sign is allowed. Maybe 15 to 17% of all sales come from sign calls. It's certainly great marketing for you because now everybody in the neighborhood sees you as the new neighborhood expert for properties. So it's a good way for getting you publicity. Paragraph 17 is our commitment to fair housing. Paragraph 18 provides attorney's fees to the winning or prevailing party, provided you agree to mediation. Remember, you win the lawsuit or the arbitration and you did not agree to mediate, you do not get your attorney's fees. You have to go through mediation to collect attorney's fees. And paragraph 19 allows for the additional addendums or any other terms. And there is our trust advisory there if you do have particularly a testamentary trust. And then our last page. Paragraph 20 allows your broker or manager to cancel this listing within 5 days. Now, some of you might say, well, why would they cancel my listing? I've trained a lot of new agents. The number one reason that your manager or broker has to terminate your listing is that you took a listing for, let's say, 6%. And then in that paragraph below, you agreed to give to the cooperating agent or the buyer's agent 6%. In other words, you put the same number twice, or 5 and 5, which means you don't get anything. I don't know why new agents do that, but they do, okay? So remember, first area is the gross commission the seller's paying. That second area, what was that, D, where that's how much you're sharing. What do you get? The amount of money that's left, right? Paragraph 21, should your seller put this in a trust, take it out of a trust, okay? The agreement is still enforceable. They put it in their LLC, or take it out of their LLC, still an enforceable agreement. If, however, your seller dies, I recommend taking a new listing on that property with either the executor or the successor trustee. Most attorneys will agree with me. I know there's some real estate agents that say, no, you don't have to do that, but I've never found an attorney that says that. So my recommendation is your seller dies, you now have the executor or the co-trustee or the successor trustee relist the property, and you now get new marketing time because you've relisted the property. Okay, just let CRMLS know what's going on. Paragraph 22 is your commitment to do mediation. This is not optional, it's mandatory. If you want to include arbitration, there's an arbitration addendum. I guess CAR was having problems. A lot of agents didn't understand the arbitration clause or paragraph. Rather than educate, CAR just decided to take it out. And now it's an arbitration addendum if you want to do arbitration. Paragraph 23 says this is the entire agreement between the parties. Paragraph 24 says the seller does own the property. If you have a situation of what we call representative capacity, in other words, the property is owned by a corporation, a limited liability company, a trust, a probate, okay? then you need to use the representative capacity addendum or form because you don't have enough lines. See, you have one line here for the seller, assuming you're going to have two sellers. But what did I say if you had a trust? You have to put the name of the trustee as trustee for the trust. So you need 3 lines, or at least 2 lines, and you don't have it. Now, could you wedge it in here? Yeah, you could if you wrote small, but you can't do that on DocuSign. And since so many of the transactions are done paperless, you have to have the representative capacity. My understanding is that CAR is going to be expanding these forms next year when they come out with a new purchase agreement, and they may be including additional signature lines so we don't have to use the representative capacity addendum anymore. All right, so now let me go into my chats and see we have here. Can the seller get a termite report outside of the RLA? Yes, they can. But if they do, then they have to share that with all potential buyers. Also, that termite report may or may not be accurate, okay? So again, my concern is if you get what I call a light termite report that shows no need for fumigation, but you actually have infestation, the property does need to be fumigated because a later report shows that, now the seller has a false sense of security. So you need to be very careful on how you educate your sellers. Let's see. Can you provide your contact information? It's right there. Can we contact you? You can always contact me for purposes of education, because that's what I do. I'm a teacher. Yes, I am an active member of the state bar, but I am not your attorney. I will not be your attorney. So while you're welcome to email me, I treat all of those as an extension of this class. As a matter of fact, you'll see in my email signature, it actually says, I am not giving you legal or tax advice because I can't. I also encourage you to copy your broker or your manager, because hopefully you asked them first and maybe they didn't have an answer for you, or maybe they're not sure. And if we want to talk about it from an education perspective, but I think it's important that anything I share with you, you share with your broker or manager in the same context, because I'm forever getting questions from agents and I'm not getting the full fact pattern. And while you think you've shared everything with me, you leave out one little thing and that changes the whole answer. And I've had client after client back decades ago when I was practicing real estate brokerage law, they would say, well, that wasn't important. Oh, yes, it was. I have to make the decision on whether something's important or not. And that's why I really need to have that exchange. But as long as you understand, I'm not giving you legal advice or tax advice. And if you have a question regarding forms or anything like that, happy to talk with you. But I also encourage you to contact the CAR Legal Hotline, because they have attorneys too, and they'll actually give you legal advice, okay? Is it legal for the seller and listing agent to ask buyers credit report, FICO, bank statements, along with pre-approval? Also require cross-qualification. Okay, so here's the problem. Yes, they can ask for, and the offer does ask for this, proof of funds to close, closing costs, and down payment. They can also ask for pre-approval. Can you ask for a cross-reference? In other words, you have a really good lender and you want the buyer approved by your lender. Can you ask for that? Yes. Let the agent know why you're asking for it. You're looking for a backup opinion. You just want to make sure that they are truly qualified? Would I ask for their credit report and FICO? That's confidential information. That's almost like asking for their social security number. There's no legal prohibition, but I would have to ask why. Because you don't know what a FICO score can and cannot do. I mean, we know what a good FICO score is. We know what a bad FICO score is. But when you get in that gray area, particularly between the 680 and the 740, right? I mean, what's A paper? What's B paper? I mean, that really gets fudgy. And then you got that other area down at 640, 600, can they do? You can't make that call. A lender has to make that call. And there are lenders that will make that call, but maybe your lender doesn't. I mean, again, so ask for a pre-approval letter, okay? Ask for a proof of closing costs. Ask for down payment verification from their bank. And that can be seasoned bank statements if they want to give those to you, or it can be a letter from their bank manager stating they have these monies available. That's fine. And if the purpose for having your lender qualify them is for verification, that's great. But if you're trying to steer some other agent's buyer to your lender, that's going to look like a RESPA violation. Because I'm going to say, okay, what's going on with you and your lender? Okay, why do you want to give them this business? Is there a financial relationship between you two? And if there is, we've got a RESPA problem because that's known as a kickback. So you want to watch out for that. So stay away from that. Let's see. Can you ask for DU findings? What does DU stand for? I hate abbreviations. Help me out with DU standard. So tell me what DU means. Can you address the sending the buyer letters and pictures? Okay, so sending the seller letters from your buyer. I think that works really nice with older sellers. It can humanize your buyer, including family photos. That can be nice too. And as delicately as I can, beware of racial, ethnic, religious prejudices that exist in the world. Can I say that okay? If sharing a photo might cause somebody who has systemic racist prejudice tendencies, could that adversely affect your buyer's position? You know where I'm going here, right? Okay, we're all kinds of, okay. Don't go there, okay? If you think it helps your buyer and your buyer's good with it, then I think okay. If you're not sure, then I'm it's kind of iffy for me. Okay, so direct underwriting. Or desktop underwriting. Desktop underwriting. Okay, so computer underwriting. So let me go back here and see what I've got. How about a more explanatory or explanative letter from the lender, not just a boilerplate letter from your lender, but have your lender go into more detail of how they analyzed this buyer's credit, income. I mean, bottom line comes down to, if the buyer doesn't mind sharing confidential information, it's okay. You can always ask, but I don't care how good your buyer is. If they lose their job next week due to COVID, or a death in the family or whatever, or if the primary wage earner dies, you're not going to close. So there's nothing absolute with your offer. You know, go with that pre-approval letter, and then, you know, get verification as soon as you can from the lender. Okay, so what else do we have here? Good session. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Nancy, will we have a class on disclosure? You know, Nancy and I were talking about this before the class started. I have a class on the purchase agreement. I'm actually going to be doing that in a week or so somewhere else. I have a class on the buyer representation agreement. I have a class on disclosures. So I can do them. Let Nancy know what you're looking for. There are some other speakers that CVAR has, and I think they may do them as well. But communicate with Nancy. I don't have anything on the horizon at CVAR, but what you tell Nancy you want is what she will talk to me or contact me over, that we will then go through. I will tell you this. I cannot possibly explain the disclosures as I went through this agreement. There's too many of them. I mean, we're talking about 300-400 pages of potential disclosures. So basically what I do is I go through the first page of every disclosure and I explain to you what it does so you can take notes, with the exception of the TDS and the AVID, because you actually have to fill those out. Everything else is pretty much boilerplate disclosure, but I will tell you what they do. What are some of the problems FSDOs run into? You know, I will talk about that in the disclosure, but we are out of time. Thank you, Amika. You took my disclosures class. The problem with being a for sale by owner is you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to write a contract. You don't have a contract form to fill out. You don't know what disclosures you're supposed to give. You don't know what escrow is. You don't know what's supposed to go through escrow. You don't know how to verify the credit worthiness of the buyer through the other agent or their lender in escrow. Let's see, another question. There's all kinds of things of being unrepresented. It's kind of like going into a lawsuit unrepresented without an attorney. You don't want to do that. Let's see. Offer gets accepted by a seller and we open up escrow. What terms can a seller cancel? Non-performance by the buyer. In other words, the buyer has to be in breach of the contract for seller to cancel. Seller doesn't have the 17 or 21 days to back out unless they use that. And I forget the name of the form, but it starts with an S. It's the seller contingency of purchasing or finding a new property form. Okay. But anyway, and you'd have to add that as an addendum. That basically gives the seller 17 days to find a replacement property. If you don't include that, the seller has no right to cancel unless the buyer is in breach. Seller didn't want to sell the property anymore and they're canceling, but didn't find a new home since it was contingent. Well, if they make finding a new home for the seller a contingency, then that would give them grounds, but they have to use that addendum to do that. Okay. But that's not legal advice. That's just answering an educational question, because none of this, what I talked about today, is legal advice. Nancy, have you had enough of me?
Never.
Yes, you have. 2 hours.
Ed, as always, it's been such a great class. We have a lot of information that we went over today. For everyone who wants to revisit this class, we can go to cvar.live. That's cvar.live. The class will be recorded and will be posted to that site at cvar.live probably Monday of next week. Also, don't forget, if you want a copy of the handout, some of you have already sent requests over and have received a copy of the handout, please email me. It's noakley@cvar.net. So it's NOAKLEY @cvar.net, CVAR.net. please email me for a copy of the handout from the slides from today's session. I just want to thank everyone for attending today. And if you want to visit cvarconnect.com for more upcoming classes, we will definitely be scheduling more classes with Ed in the future. With that, thank you so much for attending today. And Ed, as always, thank you so much for such a wonderful class. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.